Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Tech Talk by Alif. I'm your host, Moin. Joining us tonight, we've got a real asset to the world of software with over 19 years of experience. So, without any further ado, I welcome Mr. Anish Lal. Hi, Anish. How are you?
Hi, Gulam. Thank you for having me here.
It's an honor to have you to join us tonight. You've clearly kept yourself incredibly busy over the last 2 decades, winding up as a principal software engineer at Link and with the awarded, as a Microsoft MVP. We're incredibly excited to know your insights on the do's and don'ts in the tech industry.
Sure, yeah. Just 2 decades, unbelievable, right? Okay, so yeah, so thank you for mentioning that Microsoft
Yeah.
MVP. I'm a very new MVP. I've been awarded like couple of times, maybe for last three
Okay.
years, and
Okay.
primarily I did some articles. I work with Donut Foundation, which is an open source foundation,
Okay.
and those were my primary focus areas for doing that. So with respect to software engineering, my do's and don'ts changed over a period of time.
Okay.
Just like anybody in any profession gaining experience, right? My do's
Yeah.
were all about programming languages in the beginning, where C++ is the king, to now customer is the king. So that's from the beginning to now
Correct.
is what I think, right? So beyond that, right, if you want to ask anything specific, we can get to that actually.
Sure. Sure. So, I know I'm sure that you've been asked this question multiple times, I'm sure in your career, but when was it that you chose that technology is going to be your career or your passion?
It was an
Was there a
accident.
moment?
Yeah, it was an accident. I was at a carnival where I saw a computer game called
Okay,
Dave, which is built on Microsoft DOS a
okay.
long time back. So after playing that, I thought that what if I could build something like this? I never built a computer game in my career, but that was the turning point, to be honest with you.
Oh, great, great. Great. So let's jump into the questions. Since I got to know that I'm going to do this with you, I have been just one question is on the top of the mind. On the top of my mind is you've been into the industry for like 19 years. What was the piece of technology or a trend that caught your eye and has changed in a couple of years, which excited you?
Yeah, so last couple of years is AI. AI hands down, anything to do with artificial intelligence. So
Right.
in the beginning, it was sorry, I have a little bit of throat problem, right?
No, no
So in the
issues.
beginning, it was primarily a fancy text spitting machine like
Yeah.
ChatGPT when it came out.
Okay.
I never really thought that would be capable of, something you can build out of it. But then OpenAI added something called function calling, and and the rest of the models adapted like Cloud and things like that, right?
Right.
Which actually created an interesting possibility of building applications on top of it. And there comes the LangChain, which is a replica of LangChain. LangChain was one of the most popular open source libraries in 2023, I
Okay.
believe. And
Yeah.
then came Semantic Kernel, which already surpassed 1 million downloads in April, and now is closing into 2 million downloads. So
Yep.
these application building or developer friendly AI frameworks, or I would say SDKs,
Hmm.
which you can throw into your existing applications, which can integrate AI. I would say you can sprinkle AI here and there
You're
using
right.
these SDKs is one of the most fascinating things I have seen in the last couple of years.
Correct. Correct.
Beyond that, people are doing a lot with AI in vision, audio, imaging and things like that, which are
Hmm.
all fascinating. But with respect to an engineer like me, this is
Right.
this is a pivotal point where I have a very old application written in .NET, for example.
Okay.
I can just add semantic kernel and integrate. a little bit of AI into it. So,
Right.
maybe answer some questions the customers are asking in a little bit fancy way rather than just the
Correct.
UI, which is
Right.
quite fascinating to me.
Amazing. Correct. So, like, let's move on. Now you might have heard data is the new fuel, and
Mhm,
keeping that data is secure is like one of the most important aspects in the technical environment. So, like, what was like a proactive thing, or what was a critical factor that you did, which like secured your data or your file or something? Can you share like an instance on security which you implemented throughout
mhm.
your career?
Sure. First, give me a moment. Let me just clear my throat.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Take your time.
okay, so security is an interesting word, right? So that has been important, even not now, like forever, and people has
Right,
been ignoring it just because it's just a non-functional thing in general,
right,
and that and it doesn't really add any customer value. So for example, you're building an application, your engineer command saying that, hey, we want to add more security to the database so that that this and all, and then the people are thinking, what does extra the customers are getting from the application if you add that? So what happened
correct,
is people have been doing security as an afterthought, right? So something bad happens, some data is breached, then you get emails, and then your customer's data is already in the public or in the
right,
dark web, and then you gather a team and then you attack the problem.
correct.
That culture has changed recently. That's a primary thing which happened, and
Okay,
that culture changed, and people started using a word called shift left, which is
okay,
nothing but doing security not as an afterthought but as a proactive measure even before you
correct,
build the application, right? You
right,
bake security in it. So few things which are primarily useful are like considering with respect to security beyond the infrastructure, right? With respect to an
right,
engineer's point of view, of course,
correct.
infrastructure, you have to have security on the cloud, you have to have private networks, you have to have
Exactly,
VPNs, you have
exactly.
to subnets and all of that. That's all good. But with
Correct,
respect to engineers, the basic OWASP 10, which is like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, session writing, and things like that, right?
right, right,
Those has to be prevented. And most of the time, even if you're an experienced person, sometimes you kind of write code and you think like, yo, I will refactor later. The
right,
could be possibility of SQL injection, and what you can do is, or if you're in the leadership, what you can do is you can invest in tools such as like Veracode or Sonar or things like that, which actually
right,
helps you with the static and dynamic code analysis, right? So
correct,
which can, I mean, I wouldn't say these tools are like 100% perfect, but what I would say is that these tools actually can um, produce results which your team can take action on. Like, it can tell you like there is a possibility of cross-site scripting here, or
right,
session writing or SQL injection in here by
correct,
looking or scanning through the code. The second is you can integrate these tools and the static analysis tools onto your DevOps pipeline,
yep,
which wouldn't be much more harder to do, and fail the build, for example. And if you fail the build, the team is going to have to work on it, right, to fix it. The
exactly.
second thing is I have seen certain tools like Depend coming from GitHub, which
Okay,
actually tells you about third-party vulnerabilities you have. For example, if you're building a Node application or a React application, you bring in
right,
thousands of NPM packages and things like that, right? So those
correct,
tools are very, very, very helpful when it comes to handling the security issues with respect to an engineer's point of view.
correct. Amazing. You know, it's like actually amazing. So, like, what are your thoughts on, like, you've been working on microservices as well, right? You've been
Right.
engaged with microservices, and so basically microservices is like when larger systems are broken down in small manageable parts. So how do you ensure these manageable parts work well together, or what tools or strategies that you use to keep them from, like, just to keep how easy and keep things going on? What are, like, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, microservices are great. They're fantastic. There's only one catch before I even start talking about microservices,
Okay.
right? So one catch is that most engineers they really want to work on it, and it's a buzzword. And what happens is microservices generally becomes the solutions looking for problems.
Right.
So people approach it. You have a startup with two engineers. You start with microservices. You are set to fail, right? So
Correct.
microservices are a solution to specific problems, right? You always, almost always, don't need that.
Right.
Monolithic applications are fine. If you look at Stack Overflow, it's a big monolith, works fine,
Right.
right? A
Right.
monolithic, modular monoliths are fine, which are like in between microservices and monoliths. They work very well, and as you scale, you ever need a microservice, you can easily move from a modular monolith to a microservices. Now, having said
Correct.
that, that's
Yep.
just the starting point. I just want to mention that before I forget. Having said that, microservices, given the right problem, are the perfect solution. It's more like, I would say, I don't know how to give an example. Okay, it's like shooting a movie scene, right?
Okay.
In a movie scene, you have like so many actors. One actor has to give a dialogue delivery right after another. They have
Right.
to not only they have to speak, but they have to act. They have to do something in the scene.
Correct.
There is a camera and there is a director and all of that, right?
Right.
Microservices are just like that. There is a lot of components to it. Independent
Right.
services shaking hands constantly
Yeah.
together. But just like a movie set where you want to do a bigger scene, you can bring in more
Right.
actors and scale it. Microservices can be scaled. They can
Okay.
be replicated and scaled based on the number of records coming in and things like that.
Correct.
So you can have clusters like Kubernetes. You can deploy them independently, and you can actually the different teams working on different microservices can move
Right.
independently because the deployments are different. That's one of the basic aspect of having microservices rather than having one huge deployment package like monoliths,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, yeah, but still, remember the first fact. These are solutions to specific problems rather than, solutions looking for problems to solve, right?
Right. Right.
So that those are, and one thing I forgot to mention is that since there is too many players,
Right.
like movie direction, you have to have you have to have an editor, or you have to have some type of observability over the microservices, just to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do. Nothing
Correct.
is lost. And for resilience, if a packet or if a message was supposed to be sent from service A to service B, if it is lost, what is the course of action you're going to take?
Correct.
All of that is needed. But remember, microservices can be very expensive because you have to have maybe many databases. You have to
Right.
have deployment instances and all of that. It can get very expensive, especially in the cloud space.
Right.
And you almost always don't start with it. That's what my advice would be.
Okay. That was a very wonderful explanation, actually. That was a very great explanation. Yeah. So, like, beyond your, like, professional work, you've also known for contributions for, like, open set software and, like, mentoring. So, what drives your involvement in these areas, and how do you balance them with your actual work with Link?
Yeah, I mean, beyond I primarily work from home, so I get a little bit of time after. I used to commute to New York City and spend about 2.5 hours every day. So that's an extra time I get every day. There lies the answer where I find the time. Now, second is the open source software thing. I wasn't planning for it. I had a problem, a very specific problem, which I wanted to solve. I asked a question in Stack Overflow. Somebody threw an idea. I solved that problem. And
Okay.
then I thought that what if I publish it as a package to NPM and what would happen? So I built a small PDF library for Angular. Angular just came out. Angular is a front-end library. Angular just came out at that time. And then, beyond my expectations, I thought that maybe 100 people will download it, but beyond my expectations, a lot of people downloaded it. I believe
Right.
about 4 million downloads as of now for that library, right? So I would say it was an accident. And open source is not easy. It's a thankless job, and people would be unhappy about you not fixing the bugs on time and things like that when you have
Right.
a real
Right.
job where you get the money, and this
Correct.
one is just doesn't make any money, right? So this is it's more like a passion, I would say. And I would say there are bursts of time when I feel it and then I go at it, and then there are periods of time I'm like, oh, I'm too tired to do this, right?
Correct.
Because
Correct.
because that's how the open source piece work. And I'm glad with whatever contributions I have done so far, and I'm glad how the library has uh, gathered some attention and things like that. It does have its
Right.
own Stack Overflow tag, interestingly enough, nowadays. So with respect to mentoring, in my previous job, there was a coding academy which is meant for people not from great backgrounds, right? Primarily
Correct.
focusing on unfortunate folks, right? Not
Right.
unfortunate, I
Right.
didn't say unfortunate folks, people who don't have the means to
Right.
go to
Right.
regular coding academies, called C4Q, which was closer to my office. So I
Okay.
went to lunch in that building and I saw them, and then I asked, can I volunteer in any fashion? And then I got involved in it. So it's been about
Right.
6 years I have on and off contributing to them. So the best part about working with young people is that one thing you realize, yeah, they have the potential, and they have the brains, which works much better than your brain, right? And I actually learn from them. Yes, I tell them my ideas when they ask me questions and things like that, but I
Right.
actually learn
Right.
from them. I learn from their creativity. When they're building a new app, the way they're building the UI, the way they're building and integrating newer technologies, which I
Right.
sometimes haven't heard of. So it's
Right.
a give and take. It's a more of a selfish thing right now, because as much
Correct.
as they learn from me, I learn from them too. So
Right.
that's how it has been.
Amazing. Amazing. So in the beginning, you told that first C++ was king, and then customer became king.
Yeah,
So you became a more customer-oriented person afterwards.
exactly.
So, like, how do you ensure the solutions that you create meet technical requirements and business objectives, like from the customer's perspective? So, like, has that happened before? Like, can you like when you went through a perspective from a customer's part, and it became a very successful outcome? So, is there an instance like this?
I would say some of the things I built personally for myself, not from work, right? So I built an app when I was living in Jersey City. I was getting ticketed. I used, I moved there with my car, and they have street cleaning 4 days a week. You have to
Okay.
move the car. I was getting ticketed because I forget. I'm very forgetful to move the
Right.
car.
Right.
And I
Right.
eventually built an app. And I built an app very simple. It just takes in some data from Twitter, and
Yeah.
then analyze the data and put some alerts and things like that, so that people just move the car. I would say the aspect of the customer centric approach actually started there. Before that, I was just an engineer, just all
Right.
analytical and plain, and thinking that the feature should work like this, and
Exactly.
they use it. what I built. That's how it should be.
Right,
That
right,
has changed immediately. That saying that the app has nothing in it, just have one page. It doesn't do much. It just takes in some tweets from Twitter, and
right.
then it analyzes it. It produces some alerts, and probably 1,000 lines of code. And people were finding it amusing, and they were installing it. And it was only released in Android at that time, right? So
Okay,
about 50,000 New Yorkers installed it, New Yorkers and Jersey City residents. I eventually expanded it to New York, which actually gave me the thought that the customers are first, right? Technical
right,
solutions comes later. So I chose the .NET, the Xamarin for building that app. But then later I rewrote it using React Native and things like that. But that actually tells me that what customer needs plus security is
right,
the primary thing. What goes behind it is irrelevant. So for example, customers don't care if you use microservices or not, right? All they do care is they press a button if the button is doing what it is supposed to do. So whenever
right,
I'm building an app right now, or whenever I'm building a solution or API right
right,
now, I
right,
consider the customer aspect of things,
right,
almost not almost almost about 50 to 60%, and then I put the technical aspect about at 40%. Even
right,
if I'm writing an API which doesn't really have a UI or a customer like in a traditional customer way, my customers
right.
are other engineers, right? The
Correct.
UI engineers building the app who is consuming my API are my customers, right?
Right,
How easy it is for them to integrate, how easy it is to call, how easy to get the data they are looking for is should be my primary focus. And then the testing technical aspect of things, because what goes what goes in the code can be changed.
correct.
The feel you create while you're building it, that's of paramount importance. So yeah, the customer can be the real customers. The customer can be other engineers in in your organization. The
Right.
customers can be, so for example, like in an interview like this, the customers are the viewers, right? So
Right.
it's always important to understand from their shoes what they're
Perspective.
looking
Yep.
for and produce that.
Amazing. Amazing. So the app that you were talking about that you first created, is it still available on
It
Android
is. It
or
is. No, I put it on iOS too once I rewrote in React Native. So yeah, the app's name is called Parker, Parkr,
okay.
alternate street parking. So yeah, it is available in both iOS and Android, and I added a lot more features lately. And
Right.
yeah, it's still going good. About 60 or 70,000 Yorkers using it right now. I mean, that's
That's
in Android.
amazing.
In iOS, maybe about 1,000. It's not long ago I put it on iOS actually.
No, it's amazing. Actually, it's amazing. Great, great work. Great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. So let's modernizing legacy systems, correct? You've successfully updated a 15-year-old system to a modern platform. Can you like share me the challenges, like what what did you face at that time, or any, any smooth transitions that were very easy at the time?
Yeah. So I have worked on very old legacy systems, like with built using Power Builder with my previous employer and things like that.
Right, right,
It's a huge undertaking when it comes to modernizing all legacy systems, compared to
correct,
building something from scratch where you don't have anybody depending on it on a day-to-day basis, right? You have a greenfield
correct,
project. Nobody is there till you go live. So you get to do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter.
right,
You can change systems, add services, change API signatures, nothing, none of that matters. Right. So when you're rewriting a legacy system, the biggest problem is like you're driving a car and you're replacing its engine with a new
right.
engine while driving. That's probably the best way to represent what you're going to do with the legacy system, right? So there are a
Right,
few aspects of it which are much challenging, right? One is if you had to do a data migration, like you have to move from one database to another, And you have to make sure that your existing customers, which is using the system every day, is not being affected. So
Right.
that in order to ensure that, you have to have replicas of databases, right? So for example, you're moving from Sybase to SQL Server or Oracle or somewhere, just
Right.
and then you have to have a replicas of tables. When the customer writes the data into the legacy system, the data has to be replicated in your new system, right? That's number one.
Right.
Number two, sometimes some people do like a full-on upgrade. So for example, like they build the new system as a greenfield project separately, and then that goes live, and the other one is shut down, which is much more difficult to do and prone to
Okay.
failure than building building module by module, right? What I mean by that is
Right.
you disable a piece of functionality in the old system and you build that functionality in the new system. So not the other way around. The other way around. You build a functionality in the old system.
Correct.
Once
Hmm.
you're satisfied with it, you disable that functionality in the old system, and you direct the customers use in the old system to looking for that particular functionality to the new system, but they still rely on the old legacy system for the rest of the functionalities, right? So that
Right.
one you can do using feature flags. So for example, like if something goes bad in the new system, you can just switch
Right.
off the feature flag and it can still go back to the old system, making sure that
Right.
the databases of both systems are in sync, or they
Correct.
both uses the same database, right?
Correct.
So that is one of the primary challenges, the data migration and feature flags and moving piece by piece, feature by feature into the new system.
Right.
That is one of the most challenging parts of building or migrating legacy systems into new ones. Having said all of that, you always don't have to do it, right?
Okay.
So sometimes, so for example, I have found cases where an old system, very well written, right? Nicely written code.
Okay.
The technology is a little bit outdated, which
Right.
actually exposes a SOAP interface, which is old, not like REST
Okay.
interface, which can be pretty much modernized using something like an APM, right? Like an Azure API gateway, right? So
Right.
if you put something like that in front of the old SOAP service, you can expose a REST service, and the rest of the infrastructure within your organization can talk to the new REST service you expose to access the data of the old system and things like that. Eventually, for the customers of the REST service, it may look like a modern system, but behind the scenes of the REST service, it could still be an old system. But here are key things before you do move or decide to move. You have to look, is the technology outdated? It's not supported anymore. Do you have the right kind of personnel and people with the right kind of skill set to support the legacy system? Three, it's not worth maintaining. Maintaining is much more harder than building a new system. So those are the things you have to consider before you even move, right?
Right.
Sometimes engineers like me want to come to a new project, then they look at the code and then they're like, oh, the whole thing is a mess,
Right.
right? And I have to rewrite it. I have to rebuild everything, right?
Correct.
It's not
Correct.
actually almost always true. It's
Right.
because writing code is always easier than reading code, right? I don't
Right.
want to read old code. That's why I'm saying that I want to build new, um, because it's always my way is right for engineers, right?
Right.
So
Right.
somebody else wrote it. It may have been very well written, that. So I always would consider that. See, and you have to evaluate your pros and cons before you upgrade a legacy system. A legacy system built on Power Builder, I would say ditch it and build new. A legacy system built on ASP.NET MVC, I want to rewrite it using ASP.NET Core API. Maybe
Right.
not sometimes. If it is well written, as long as it can run, it's good enough. And then you eventually move it piece by piece,
Right.
providing an API middleman right in the middle, so that that can be transitioned smoothly.
Right. So when you say when you when you prefer writing a new code, so do you have any like specific set of tests before you like confirm this code? Yeah, this is the code that I'm going to go with, or you just like have this confirmed that if I'm writing this code, I'm sure that this is going to turn out how I want it the way to turn out, or do you have any tests
Yeah,
that
I mean,
you?
yeah, unit functional integration testing is always good to do. But
Okay,
there is always engineers going left and right on this, right? So
right.
if you look at a company like Facebook, which is built with no testing in it at all, so
Yep,
they
correct,
don't have the concept of testing. I believe the father of TDD, which is test driven development, joined Facebook, who is a big advocate of writing test
right,
first, right? Test driven is test first, then feature. And he was amazed by how the company works and how the software runs, and it still runs, right? So,
right,
interestingly enough, the, there are no right or wrong way to do things, but
correct.
generally, in the general vicinity of things,
Hmm.
writing unit test and writing functional performance load test and things like that would help you build and scale the system effectively, for sure. So when you're writing new source code, or even if you have old source code, these things can help you tremendously. That's my take on it.
Wonderful, wonderful answer. Wonderful answer. So, yep. So when you've worked on large scale projects, right? When you're working on a large scale project, how do you plan to ensure that the software can handle like the future growth and like the user or the data? Any examples over here? Anything that you've done in the past which have turned out to be great towards the future, and it will be ahead.
Yeah. So in order to do that, as I said, this comes down to the parts of the question we answered about modular monoliths and microservices and things like that, right?
Right, right,
So it's a strategic planning beyond a little bit beyond an engineer's planning. So, for
correct,
example, I'm building a project. The project is meant to be used by internal employees, right?
right,
I don't have to worry about the question you were asking, right?
correct,
Today there are 1,000 employees. Maybe it can be 5,000, it can be 10,000, but you get to have that vicinity or visibility into the future to a great extent.
correct,
If you were to build a social media platform, like for example, the beginning stage of Facebook, right? Something like
right,
that, or Instagram
right,
or
right,
TikTok, then you already know it's not an internal project or it's not targeting internal employees, it's targeting the public and it can grow tremendously. That is the time you design differently.
correct,
For example, those kind of things you can even you start with microservices, you start with scalability, you write a lot of load testing to make sure that ahead of time, to make sure that even if you get 1 million customers hitting the services on the same day, your
right,
services are stretchable enough. And you also do things like testing by creating or simulating failures. So,
right.
which like, Netflix have this term called chaos engineering. What they do is
Okay.
they kind of bring the services down randomly. I believe they have a service to bring services down. That's a type of testing.
Okay.
So the job of they call it some type of monkey, I forgot. So what it does is they call it chaos monkey. So the job of the chaos monkey is to randomly shut things down and see if
Right,
Netflix is going down, right?
right.
So the idea is to create failure ahead of
Okay.
time to make sure that you succeed when a real situation like that comes in, right?
Okay.
You understand? So those are the kind of things you can do, but I wouldn't recommend doing that so much upfront. The basic thing you can do is simulate a large user base and see how the application you build performing. Number two, you
Right,
build you build with handshakes. So what I would mean by that is you build as much decoupled as you can. So like modular fashion. I am not saying microservices. It can be microservices, but it has to be separate modules. It has to have separate points of failures. And then the
Right.
third thing you need to consider is resilience. If there are failures, what are your backup plans, right? So
Right. Right.
these are the few considerations I would have if I were to build for 1 million customers and I'm starting today, right?
Right.
And I'm expecting hundreds of thousands of customers to be
Right.
online at a single point or in a single second on the system. These
Correct.
would be considerations I would be doing, right? So when I have 100 customers, I wouldn't probably build the system for 1 million customers. I probably build the system for 100 customers
Right.
with a stretchable plan which can handle 1 million customers, right? So so you start with cloud first. You start with modular or components across the applications. You start with what if one day I have to become microservices thoughts,
Right.
and you start with a lot of load testing to simulate heavy customer load and things like that. So this is
Correct.
what I would do if I were to begin something which strategically I think would grow and have a lot of customers at a single point in time.
Very, very well put. Very well put, Anish. And so you've been a very creative person since the beginning, correct? You
Yeah.
also have a startup, I feel, am I correct? It's called Startup Plus, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So yes. What is it about, and like, can you share some insights about that?
It's just a community. Basically, I run a bunch of events
Okay.
under the banner of Startup Plus. So it's a community of about 15,000 local New Yorkers who are in the startup space.
Okay.
Some of them are founders, a lot of investors, and things like that. So the idea
Right.
behind it was that um, I wanted to go to events. I'm curious about startup pitch events and things, just to hear
Right.
what people are building, how they're
Right.
building it, how they're gaining customers. And I also wanted to know the marketing strategy. As an engineer, you never know. You can write code, but you don't know how to market things. You don't know how to
Correct.
make people buy things,
Right.
to be honest
Right.
with you.
Right.
So to understand all of that, I was looking to go to events in New York City. And I was in New York City every day for work anyway. So in the evenings, I
Right.
used to go to events before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, kind of, the whole scene shut down. And that's when I thought of just building one. And I brought in about six, 7 customers, 6, 7 attendees for my first event. Eventually,
Right.
it grew, and it consistently bring about 120 attendees. And I do
Right.
have pitch and networking events. I have just startup networking events and things like that. So the community
Okay.
grew. I had about 75 events in New York City over the last 3 years, and numerous founders across the globe came and pitched in my events to local investors in New York City.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it just happened. It just happened out of my need, actually, but now I enjoy running it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So you've been into app development, you've been into startups, and you've been all over the place. So like we spoke about Parker. Now, like, are there any other apps that you've
A couple of
created?
more. Yeah, there are a couple of more. There is one called Remito,
Okay.
which is an app built to show the hidden fees of international money transfer. So Remito have presence in about 60 countries now, and it I when I came here, and I believe in 2012,
Right.
I had a mortgage in India, and I was sending money home every month, and I was
Okay.
sending through the only company which I knew at that point. So it was a payment, payment provider, right? So which
Okay.
transfers the US currency to Indian currency, right?
Right.
And later I realized that there were other players in the same space who would have given me more for money for my dollar, right?
Right.
And by the time I realized that I already lost a lot of money, that is
Correct.
when I thought that one day I have to build something which can show different providers on a given date, and what is the amount they're getting, what if they're sending $1,000, and what are they getting and how much are they paying in fees, how much they are paying in markups and things like that, right? That is the idea
Okay.
behind Remito. So Remito is an app which actually shows the customers the markups from the mid-market rate. Mid-market rate is actual rate, the USD
Okay.
INR rate, and what is the markup, what is the fees, and what charges you have to pay if you are using credit card, what charges you have to pay if you are using debit card or versus bank account versus
Right.
PayPal versus things like that. So it kind of it kind of works in that gray area and gives out the complete details to the customers so they can choose if Zoom is better today or Western Union is better today if I were to send
Correct.
some money to another country. So
Right.
it doesn't only work with US currencies. I support about 60 countries and a
Right.
lot of
Right.
countries in Middle East and some countries in Europe too. So
Amazing. 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 So you've been creative since the beginning, and you've always created which you had a need for, and it kind of blew up. Correct.
yeah, I mean, I all of these things I created are my problems, right? I all of these were my problems. I had to park, so
Yep.
Parker came out. I was sending money, so the remitter came out. I was looking for an event to go to. That's how Startup Plus came out. See,
Right.
everything. I was looking for a solution in Angular. That's
Right.
how the library came. So all
So
of these
you.
things are generally my problems I have been solving, and then
Right.
I put it out there as a solution to the rest of the folks
Correct. Correct.
who probably might have faced the same problem which I thought they might have. And some
Exactly.
of them became successful, some of them not. Some of them were just curious projects. But I'm happy with the outcome overall.
Exactly. Wonderful. So you, uh, everything is just amazing. Amazing apps and everything. Honestly. So would you say that curiosity plays a very major role in technology? Do you have a say
Yes.
in this?
Engineers has to be curious, I would say. Without that, I mean, I think engineers has to be analytical and curious. I would also say engineers, if possible, I mean, if possible, not everybody, has to be a little
Okay.
bit more creative too. If
Right.
so, for example, like artists are creative, they
Correct.
can
Correct.
they can build something out of nothing. Just give them a
Exactly.
canvas,
Correct.
give them a movie set, they can build a movie. So I would say that engineers like that in general, in my opinion, or I like
Right.
that, right?
Right.
But the moment you kind of try to connect uh, that piece as well, I believe you can become creative. You can build something new. You can
Right.
you can not just technical problems you're solving. You're thinking from the customer standpoint. You're building a solution which is about parking, but you are building it with the creativity in mind, how the customers are going to use it.
Correct.
That's very important, right?
Right.
Your grids and charts and things like that are not useful if the
Right.
customers don't find them useful. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
They
Right.
they may just want to know, should I keep the car on the street or not? They probably
Correct.
wouldn't want to know the whole charts of or the whole calendars and things like that of things. So
Correct.
that
Correct.
is that is generally what I think when it comes to engineer's curiosity. As an engineer, if you're
Right.
in the beginning of your career, I would say um, be curious as much as you can and
Right.
keep learning. But once you get a little bit of mature in that space, I would
Right.
say start thinking from the customer's shoes. That's very important too.
Correct. So having that level of curiosity and the perspective of a customer is very
It's,
important.
it's very important. Yeah. Your technical problems are not your customer's technical problems.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
very important to know that they have
Right.
different set of problems. Your job
Correct.
is to solve them. That's always what I would say to my juniors because I already
Right.
know. But I was different.
Right.
I thought that my technical problems are the biggest problems. I don't really care
Correct.
what they see or what they I build, they use. So now I think the other way around. I build what they want to see.
Correct.
That's a change of mindset.
So that has so when you said that your customer approach, customer is king approach, so this is how it came into place.
That's
And
correct.
amazing. That is a actually amazing approach. So amazing. And one last question that I'll have is, what would you give an advice to, new people who've just joined technical backgrounds, uh, have a passion for coding or have a passion for like any technical field as a career, just like myself, I'm also starting very new right now. So, like, what is the piece of advice that you would try to give someone with all that 19 years of experience, the 20 years of experience that you have?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to start, I would find a mentor if I can. So it's like a
Okay,
few things, right?
right,
Two, one is find a mentor who can guide you. I mean, not always you get one. I didn't had one.
right,
I wish I had one
correct,
who would have, just steered me clear of my engineers are superior kind of brain, right? When I
right,
started,
right,
I was like, my programming language, the language I use is superior
right,
to all, like C++ is superior.
correct,
What I do is superior. The products I work on are superior. I had a mentor, he would have shut me down and said, it doesn't matter what if your customers are not using it, right? So
right,
that's important. Number two, I would say have an online presence, and build an online presence early on in your stage in your career. So, for
okay,
example,
mm,
if you can answer Stack Overflow questions, if you can write articles, if you can contribute to, I would say, open source, right?
right,
Or the more you write, the
right,
more you read code, it helps you.
right,
The more you write
right,
in terms which other engineers understand, which are your customers, if you're writing an article and you can
okay,
write interestingly, you you are already shooting to be a leader, right? That's
correct,
the second thing, I would say. The third is, even if you are very, very junior, work collaboratively, because communication is very important. Because in this field, I don't know, in every field, I believe, the
right,
way you articulate things are extremely important, right? So you have a great idea to improve the product you're working on. You just joined a team. If you don't know how to talk about it, if you don't know how to communicate about it, in
correct,
terms of how the person who is listening understands it. So maybe
right,
you're talking to the BA, right? Maybe you're talking to the actual customers, or maybe you're talking to your project manager, maybe you're talking to your colleague who is an engineer. So
right,
you have to choose the right tone and language to communicate with these different people. You are going to use
correct,
different types of, I would say, different types of languages
right,
with different types of folks. And if you don't know
right,
how to use that, that's something you have to work on. So these are some of the primary and key things I would say as in the starting point you
right,
have to focus on.
right,
Find a mentor, create an online presence. It's very important
right,
nowadays. And that
right,
online presence involves open source contributions, writing something,
right,
contributing something, and the third is communication is key, and the social
correct,
skills within your team is key.
right,
So it's very important to gel within the team and work together, rather than building a mindset that what I do is always right.
correct. Amazing. Thank you, Anish, for like so amazing words and such amazing great advice. I'm sure people will actually, listen to it and, try to get them in action. I myself would try to do that, probably. And so, just like one final last question I wanted to ask you is, does ever learning stop for an engineer or a technical person?
Simple answer is no. It never stops. Unfortunately, and I would say it's a fortunately and unfortunately, it never stops.
Correct.
So yeah, you don't. You can't stop. Unfortunately, it is just that something new comes out every day, and you
Right,
have to be on top of it because people are going to ask you about it. If
right,
you're working in an organization, you're senior, uh, people are going to say like, "Hey, I heard this. Can we build? Oh, can you add this to this app which we already have?" And
right,
that questions are always going to come. So the
right,
learning never stops. And I would say if you can write code, if you get chance to write code,
right,
even if you're senior, that's one of my selfish motives of contributing to open source. Right, as you grow up in your ladder, your chances of writing code, you read a lot of code, but
right,
the chance of writing is like building something yourself rather than, it's like building a movie, it's like making a movie versus watching a movie, you know what I'm saying? So
right,
that
right,
different feeling you get, and that's a big selfish feeling of satisfaction, right?
right,
That you
right,
get if you can find that in your work. Doesn't
right,
matter, you become a manager, whatever you become, I would say,
correct,
uh, keep that keep that a little bit on your side. Not because it's maybe it may come handy one day, maybe it wouldn't, but it is going to give you that a little satisfaction of why you became an engineer all the time in your career. So
right,
even if you grew up to 20 years in the industry, or 30 years or 40 years, I would
right,
say that's something I still do, and I
right.
would do in the foreseeable future. So yeah.
Great, great. That was an amazing talk. I was, genuinely, I was very, very excited to, speak to you and, have a discussion with you. But, that excitement level has been crossed. It was an amazing talk and it was an amazing interview. Thank you, Anish. And, thank you for all the things. I think the only key points that we need to have from here right now is that we always need to be curious and we always need to be learning. Correct.
That's everybody. It was
Thank you.
it was wonderful talking to you too, Gulam. And good luck with whatever you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure, sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anish. Thank you for joining. And let's hope to connect soon,
Sure,
anytime in the future.
sure, sure.